Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Sacred Contracts written by Carolyn Myss, and we are starting Chapter 4 in today's video. Chapter 4 consists of 12 different sections. They are not all really long, so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can without making too many videos, and hopefully without making too many videos that are long. I'm trying to avoid that, breaking it up into smaller sections, but it's kind of difficult to break up some of these sections because we break up steps in some of these chapters, and I really don't want to do that. I really want to try to keep everything as cohesive as I can. So I'm going to do my best, and I think chapter 4 should be okay, but as we get further in, there may be a little bit more of an issue with it. So chapter 4, we're going to be speaking about archetypes, and there are 4 principal energy companions, and there's a quote here by somebody by the name of Thomas Paine. The mind, once enlightened, cannot again become dark. And that is from something called Common Sense. Maybe that's a book, and maybe the author is Thomas Paine. Archetypes are your energy guides to your highest potential, the fulfillment of the 5 stages of your sacred contract. You have 4 constant archetypes at work in your life: the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur. Now we'll work with these 4 universal archetypes. The child is among the most powerful patterns in our psyches because we are born into it. It is our first state of consciousness. Before Freud, the influence of childhood experiences on psychological and emotional well-being was rarely investigated. In the late 20th century, that attitude not only changed, it became extreme and even self-indulgent, in my opinion. Most Western societies now attribute adult behavior and motivations to the quality of an individual's childhood. Much blame for aberrant, immoral, or sociopathic actions is offloaded onto childhood resentments, sadness, and neglect. Judging from the people who have come to see me professionally, validating many people's views of their early experiences can provide a passageway to healing. But it also has often led people to become stuck in their early wounds. The child actually has many aspects, including the wounded or orphan child, to which many people relate, and the magical or innocent child, among others. Engagement with the magical child is rare, but it is pure delight to be in the company of someone who radiates that archetype. Sir George Trevelyan, who has been called the father of the New Age movement in England, was such a person. Educated in the old world tradition at Cambridge, George was the quintessential Victorian gentleman, eccentric, deep-voiced, and captivatingly dramatic. Although his father had expected him to follow family tradition and pursue a career in academics, George was consumed early on by an interest in spirituality and alternative healing. His entire life was a mythic journey in which he explored the nature of human consciousness. He consciously lived in 2 realms, the physical and the spiritual. He spoke about having conversations with nature spirits and wind sprites, garden spirits, and angels, making this type of inter-realm dialogue seem exactly what it should be, natural. Although I tend to be a bit skeptical of people making such claims, I believed Sir George because of his matter-of-fact attitude, selflessness, and innocence. He never demanded that others acknowledge what he described as his world. I met Sir George on New Year's Eve 1982 at the Findhorn community in Scotland when he was in his early 70s. Thereafter, he and I presented several workshops together during the 1980s in different parts of England, and each one was an adventure into his alternate reality. One time, he took me to the place that is believed to be the mythical home of Camelot and Avalon, and he spoke about the Knights of the Round Table as if he knew them on a first-name basis. And by this time in our relationship, I would have believed he did. The most memorable scene in which George's magical child stepped into action took place in 1986 at a workshop we did in a classic English manor house. As we were lecturing to a group of people, George suddenly stopped speaking and focused his attention on the back of the room. I hesitated for a moment and then, knowing that I might be opening us up all for a real surprise, asked him, "What are you looking at?" "Why," he replied, "the god Pan has just decided to join us. The god Pan, so capital Pan. Immediately, everyone turned to the back of the room, but all they saw was the wall, not the mythic Greek god of the forest, half man, half goat, with cloven hooves and 2 horns on his head. "So what does he want?" I asked George. "He simply wants to join in on the fun." "Well, tell him he's welcome to stay with us as long as he likes," I said. George laughed with delight and went back to teaching. I, on the other hand, kept staring at the back of the room, hoping that I could catch even a glimpse of this god who had decided to honor us with his presence. I didn't see a thing, yet as I watched George inspire the group while reading them his favorite poetry, I realized that I had made my own spiritual work too serious. Although the intense demands of my own spirit repeatedly affirm that I am in touch with another dimension, George showed me that the process of working with our spirits should be magical. He helped many others open to their own personal gods and energy companions, allowing magic back into their lives through his nightly enchanting views and teachings. And when I say nightly, it's like a knight in shining armor. That evening over dinner, I asked George how it was that he could see Pan and the spirits of the nature kingdom. "Oh, that's easy," he said. "I look through the imagination of my inner child. All children can see into that world when they are very young. The door between worlds closes as you get older and you begin to believe that there is no such thing." For George, this archetype and its imaginative world had become a companion. In the beginning. Sir George was an extraordinary character, but his experience is not unique. Others throughout history have been aware of the living presence of archetypes and been comfortable discussing them and discoursing with them. In ancient Greece, Plato asserted the existence of archetypal ideas or forms as the centerpiece of his philosophical view of the world. As the intellectual historian Richard Tarnas points out, Platonic forms are not conceptual abstractions that the human mind creates by generalizing from a class of particulars. Rather, they possess a quality of being, a degree of reality that is superior to that of the concrete world. Platonic archetypes form the world and also stand beyond it. They manifest themselves within time and yet are timeless. They constitute the veiled essence of things. According to Tarnas, Plato often saw the gods and goddesses of Greek traditions as symbols of universal patterns of emotion. In his Symposium, for instance, Plato envisioned Eros, the Greek god of love, as a complex and multidimensional archetype which at the physical level expresses itself in the sexual instinct, but at higher levels impels the philosopher's passion for intellectual beauty and wisdom, and culminates in the mystical vision of the eternal, the ultimate source of all beauty. As we have seen, the great Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, or Jung, was the first to define and explore extensively the nature and role of universal archetypes in human consciousness. By their very nature, Jung explained, archetypes have their origins in the dawn of human history. The psyche is not of today, he wrote. Its ancestry goes back many millions of years. Individual consciousness is only the flower and the fruit of a season, sprung from the perennial rhizome beneath the earth. Jung tied archetypes inextricably to his concept of the collective unconscious. Which is distinct from the individual unconscious. The collective unconscious is the inherited experience of the entire human race. Your consciousness is affected by this greater unconscious, and yours also makes a contribution to the collective. Echoing Plato, Jung defined archetypes as definite forms in the psyche that seem to be present always and everywhere. Jung's best-known disciple, Joseph Campbell, wrote that, since archetypes or norms of myth are common to the human species, they are inherently expressive. of common human needs, instincts, and potentials. When Jung propounded of his theory of archetypes, he had been steeping himself in the mythology and folklore of the world, from the Egyptians, Babylonians, and Greeks to the Gnostics and American Indians. Just as some kind of analytical technique is needed to understand a dream, so a knowledge of mythology is needed in order to grasp the meaning of a content deriving from the deeper levels of the psyche, the collective unconscious. So far as we can say anything about it at all, appears to consist of mythological motifs or primordial images, for which reason the myths of all nations are its real exponents. In fact, the whole of mythology could be taken as a sort of projection of the collective unconscious. Volumes have since been written about archetypes. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Jean Shinoda Bolin, Robert Bly, and many other authors have made immense contributions to this vast subject. Drawing on an apparently limitless supply of myths and folk tales from disparate cultures around the globe, these writers have identified hundreds of archetypal patterns that have a significant effect on our daily lives and relationships. Their work implies that although archetypes are patterns of influence that are both ancient and universal, they become quite personalized when they are a part of an individual's own psyche. Since your sacred contract is embodied in a support system of 12 archetypes, perhaps the most advantageous way to think of them is as intimate companions. Actually, the nature of your archetypes is both intimate and impersonal. Viewed through the heart, they are personal enough to be called companions. Viewed with the mind, they are impersonal, symbolic patterns that serve in the energetic organization of your spiritual evolution. As I say in my workshops, a personal experience filtered through an impersonal or symbolic attitude creates a vastly different psychic chemistry from taking everything personally. Just as your archetypes have a dual nature, you too have the constant challenge of holding within yourself a personal heart and a symbolic mind. Don't misinterpret this statement to mean that all relationships and life experiences will be simple and painless if you just treat your interactions impersonally and impassively. That, of course, is nonsense. What we need to do is make conscious choices and take responsibility for ourselves, including our thoughts and attitudes. Working with your archetypal patterns is the best way I know to become conscious of yourself, the effects of your actions, and the need for choosing wisely every day. Okay, so now here we have a bit of an opening to going into the actual archetypes. So it's titled The 4 Archetypes of Survival. That's the child, the victim, prostitute, and saboteur. And if you're not familiar with the saboteur, sorry, I have an itch on my leg. Basically, it's just somebody that constantly sabotages themselves. And I think a lot of us do that. I think a lot of us will be able to relate to so many of these examples. And it makes sense because this is something that we all have within us. These 4 archetypes that I'm going over are something that we all carry within us, from ancestry, from ourselves, from past lives to current lives to our soul aspects that are living, if you believe in soul aspects, that are living lives currently on this planet. Oh, and by the way, I do have my notebook and pen if you need to grab yours. The author said we would need it at some point for insights, ideas, and exercises. I personally haven't needed it yet, but I think reading it to somebody may be a little bit different than sitting down and thinking on some of the things that she has posed to us, especially in chapter 3. So I will have to do that. All right, so the 4 archetypes of survival: child, victim, prostitute, saboteur. Current attitudes hold that our characters and personalities are formed during childhood through a combination of nature and nurture. Indeed, during the first 2 decades of life, we make our first promises to ourselves to provide for and protect ourselves. Many people have told me that as adolescents, they promised themselves they would never be physically abused or humiliated again. Children make vows to themselves that they will become scientists, artists, or mothers, or simply find a way to become wealthy. These commitments are part of our path in the physical world. All are influenced by the 4 primary archetypes. During the first years of our lives, we come to realize that the quality of our physical lives depends on our sense of personal power, on our ability to survive. Long before we become emotionally and spiritually empowered, we must engage our personal power in the material world. We also begin to understand that we must deal with moral issues or suffer the consequences. In engaging with the physical world and the moral choices that present themselves, we develop self-esteem. This is the beginning of spiritual maturity. The 4 primary archetypes, the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur, symbolize our major life challenges and how we choose to survive. Together, they represent the issues, fears, and vulnerabilities that cause us to negotiate away the power of our spirits within the physical world. They also can come to represent spiritual strengths for dealing with real life and spiritual issues. These 4 archetypes are like the 4 legs of a table on which our sacred contract rests. The table legs represent our relationship to the ground beneath our feet and to the universal energy that supports our life. They might be straight or curved or embellished with carvings and images, depending on how these 4 archetypes work within our psyches during the course of our lives. But they need to be stable to support the weight of the tabletop, or our life and mission. All 4 archetypes influence how we relate to material power, how we respond to authority, and how we make choices. These archetypal energies are neutral, and I must reinforce that point here because of the connotations of their names. Although it can be difficult to see how the victim, prostitute, and saboteur can provide us with powerful and supportive imagery, they do and will. You'll come to see how even the most common variant of the child archetype, the wounded child, can help you deal with your life today. These 4 archetypes are the intimate companions of your intuition. They make you conscious of your vulnerabilities, your fear of being victimized. They allow you to see how you sabotage your creative opportunities or abort your dreams, and in the future, they will become your allies in fulfilling opportunities and dreams. Your archetypes will become your guardians and will preserve your integrity, refusing to allow you to negotiate it away under any circumstance. Your archetypes can help you transcend the shadow belief that everyone has a price and allow you to see that you are not for sale. They will allow you to become completely self-reliant. Through them, you will come to see options where others see excuses. The richest reward in working with these survival archetypes, however, reveals itself in the manner in which your contract unfolds. While it is a given that you have contracts to meet certain people, it is not determined ahead of time what kind of interaction you will have with each of them. Interesting. That is up to you, and of course, it's up to them. You can choose how you interact, but the more conscious you are about the patterns that influence your behavior, the more likely it is that your choices and the lessons you get from them will be positive. If your choices are formed only by your unconscious, however, and you are unaware of the archetypal energies influencing you, you will more likely act out of insecurity and defensiveness. By remaining aware of the archetypal energies, you stay conscious of both your divinity and your potential and the everyday world. Through your archetypes, you will find your own middle way, the path of your sacred contract. Okay, so after that section, we then go into the 4 archetypes in more detail. So the child or guardian of innocence, and then we have a story here about somebody named Ollie. Then the victim, guardian of self-esteem, the prostitute, guardian of faith,
And lastly, the Saboteur, guardian of choice. And then after that, we're going to talk about living in the shadow, which is probably, yeah, they're not very long. The shadow and your divine potential, shadow contracts, confronting the shadow, return of the orphan. And I think that's going to be the longest one, but we're going to stop right there. And in the next video, I will definitely read the first 2 of the 4 archetypes. And then depending on how long the first 2 take us, I may just go ahead and read all 4 of the archetypes in one. But here we have our introduction into the chapter and into the actual archetypes that we're going to be learning about and why they're so important to understand, how they mold us, how it helps us decide what we do with the interactions we have, with the choices that we have, and how our contract plays out initially. So we're going to stop right there, and we'll touch on those next 4, 2 to 4 in the next video. So I hope you all have a lovely weekend. If you're celebrating Mother's Day with a mother, or you are a mother, or you're a mother figure, or you have one of those, or a grandmother that's like a mother to you, whatever it is, doesn't even have to be a mother by the traditional sense. I hope that you all have a beautiful Mother's Day, a beautiful weekend. I love you all. I thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again for the next section of Chapter 4 in Sacred Contracts. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.